Hello everyone. This is a recreation of an old video about improving an FPS in a game. And this time we're gonna talk about instances. So as you can see on the screen right now, I have a huge forest. And it gives me something around 100 FPS when I'm looking from the top. And if I will move inside of it, it has a lot of vegetation and it gives me 70 to 90, 80 FPS. Also, everything here is interactable. So I can go and, for example, pick up some branches. Okay, pick up something from an earth and so on. So, first thing that we have to keep in mind is how we are creating a forest. In my case, I'm generating a forest using a PCG. So I have such PCG graph for a forest. That's it. And here I'm spawning, for example, trees with different trees and so on, so on. So what is the main thing that we gonna do? We're gonna replace every instance with some actor, and when we're close to it. And we're gonna replace every actor with an instance when we are far from it. So let's start. And we're gonna make it very simple and adjustable so that every time we're gonna add a new vegetation or we will change a static mesh for a tree, our component will still work. Or it will take a very small amount of time to change it. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna open my folder with components and create a new component. And it's gonna be forest, for example, optimizator. Also, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna disable my old component. Let me find it. Here it is. So now we've generated a forest. Okay, it's not the way to disable it. Let me just delete it. So now we have everything here that is not interactable. Also, PCG allows us not to spawn static meshes, but to spawn inactors. And if you will spawn inactors instead of static meshes, you will mention how a huge FPS drops, because holding such big amount of actors on the scene is too hard. It will not be able to render with a small render time. That's why we are using in instances. So don't use spawn actor here, only if it is a very small amount of actors. Here on the PCG, on the static mesh spawner, you can also see a component class that is selected for static mesh. So it is spawned in hierarchical instance static mesh component. We have a few selections here: instance static mesh component, hierarchical, grass, and foliage. I don't remember what grass and foliage does. Foliage is used when we're painting foliage, it's used for grass that's attained on the earth, and so on. I think grass is the same as foliage, but with some small changes. The main two are instance static mesh and hierarchical. If you don't have any lots for your static mesh, like let me open a tree, if you have only LOD1, LOD0, then you don't need to use hierarchical instance static mesh. Hierarchical instance static mesh allows to change lots for an instance. So lots will work for every instance in the hierarchical static mesh. Now let's open our folders that we've created for a forest. And let's create a new blueprint actor component and call it forest optimizator, for example. And let's open it up. What we need to know. We need to get a character at first. So let's get an owner of this component and promote it to variable. Call it character. Okay. Next we're gonna call some function called setup. So let's create this function and call it setup and call it from begin play. So what is function gonna do? It's gonna add some overlap collision to our character. So let's get a character and add component by class and select a box component. It's a box collision. We have to provide a relative transform. A relative transform, I think that we will use. Let's open a character, by the way, bp main character. And let's add a box component here. Let's add a box collision like this. Move it a little bit here and select a size for it, but not using a scale. We should change an extents. So let's place 90 here, 90 here, and 180, for example, on the z-axis. And I think that it should be longer on x-axis. Let's make it 200 here and 200 on y. And I think such a box, maybe even 300 on x, such box is fine. So every instance in this box will be replaced with some actor. So let's copy a location of this box and paste it. Okay, we cannot paste it here. Well, location is 200 on x and y and z stays 0. Now let's set an extents for this box. Let's call set extend without any updates of an overlap, and extend is just a half of a size. So we don't need to know this, we will just copy this extents like 320 and 20, 300, 200 and 200. So x is going to be 300, 200, 200. Compile and save. And now we can delete this box from a character because it will be added by a component. Now, what do we need to do? We need to make this box to overlap with our forest, but it should not be overlapped by other actors. So let's open our settings, project settings, and create a new collision for our box. Here on object channels, we can create a new object channel, and let's call it, for example, forest vegetation replacer. And by default, forest vegetation replacer, and by default it's gonna be ignored by everyone. I will not tap accept because I have already created it in my previous old video, but you should tap accept. So now we have such object channel. Now we can close project settings. Next, let's open Forest Optimizer and set collision object type for our box collision. And it is gonna be forest vegetation replacer. Now, what it gonna overlap? Let's open PCG graph, or you're making this using your foliage. If you're using a foliage, you can just select your foliage and check what. Oh, okay, you don't need to check for simple foliage. Simple foliage is just world static, but in PCG you can select an object type for your static mesh. So you can select static mesh spawner, and in collision you will be able to see an object type. In my case, it's world dynamic, but sometimes it's world static. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna tell this box that it will find and overlaps with world static and world dynamic. So let's set response. First, let's set collision response to all channels and set it to ignore, so that we will disable every collision for every other channels. Next, we're gonna set collision response to channel world static, and it's gonna be overlap. And the same for world dynamic, and it's also gonna be overlap and connected. Now our box will overlap with our instances, but we don't have an event to handle it. So let's create it. Let's make our setup function to return this box. So let's add a return node, and let's add a sequence here, like this. And after setup of this box has completed, we will return this component. Let's call it box collision. Now let's go back into begin play. We have a setup here and it returns us a box collision. And let's bind some event. Let's bind event and we need on begin overlap. Where is it? Bind event overlap. Here it is, bind event on component begin overlap, connected, and we will also need to bind event on end overlap. Now we have to create an event. So let's type create event for this one, duplicate it, and we're gonna do the same for this one. Here we can select an already created function or event, or we can generate a new event. So I'm gonna generate a matching event, just tapping on create a matching event, and type make its name something like on box did overlap. And the same for here, on box did end overlap. So now we have these two events that will be called every time that box overlaps with something. But we don't need to use something, we need to check whether it is a hierarchical instance static mesh component, or in your case it may be just an instance static mesh component. So we're getting other component here and checking, casting it to hierarchical instance static mesh component. And the same is going here, other component, like this. Okay, what we're gonna do next? We're gonna call some function that will replace some hierarchical instanced mesh with some actor. So let's create a function and call it replace instance with actor. And another function called replace actor with instance. So replace actor with instance. No, we're gonna set up replace instance with actor. It should have some inputs. First input is gonna be in which hierarchical instance static mesh component we're gonna do this. So first input is gonna be component of type hierarchical instance. Oh, instance static mesh component. And the second input is gonna be an index, so that we will be able to know on which index we have overlapped some component. Okay, we're gonna check here first if a static mesh is is replaceable, so that we should replace it, because for example in my forest I have just decorative items like ferns. For example, like this, it's not interactable and I don't care whether it is an actor or it is a static mesh, it should just stay here. But everything else here should be replaced. So how we gonna do that? First, let's open and we need to know what is the component. We have different components. Like if you open a PCG, you will see a lot of hierarchical static meshes here. First, static mesh components here. First, for example, for one static mesh, second is for second, and so on. You will have a HISM for every static mesh, for every different static mesh. Well, and every HISM contains a static mesh that it instances. So we want to check this static mesh. So let's go here and get static mesh for current HISM that we have overlapped. And let's get object name. Object name is a unique name, so it will be a unique name for this static mesh. Now, what I want to do, I want to have a data table in which we will have a list of all replaceable instances and a nectar with which we can replace this instance. So let's create a structure and call it as forest instance replacer, for example. And what it will have? It will have just an actor of type actor. That's it. Let's close it and let's create a data table. Data, where is it? Data table. And select this structure here. Forest instance replacer. Okay. DT forest instance replacers. Let's open it up. And we're gonna add some rows. So what's gonna be a row name? A row name is gonna be a static mesh name. So for example, at first I want to replace, I don't know the names of these bushes, but for example this branch. So let's open our PCG and I have where I'm spawning the branches, by the way. Here I'm spawning the branches and I have one static mesh and it is called SM branch. Oh, that's a cool name. So here is a name. I'm just copying it, opening my data table and pasting it into a row name. And I have to select a class. By the way, let's open forest instance replacer and it should be not type of vector. It should not be an object reference. It should be a class reference. Save it, open data table again and select a nectar with which we want to replace it. It's going to be BP branch, for example, in my case. So every static mesh of type SM branch will be replaced with a nectar of BP branch. Now let's open forest optimizer back. What we're gonna do with this object name? We're gonna check if we have a row in this data table with the same name. So let's get data table row names. Select the data table here. It's gonna be our DT forest instance replacers. And we have to check if one of the rows have the same name as an object name. So do we have a contains? We have contains. But it will not give us. Okay. We will check if it contains. And if contains, then we're gonna get this row. We're gonna get data table row. The same data table, forest instance replacers, and the row name is gonna be this name. So this object name converted to a name type. and we will receive an out row. And if we break it, we will get a class of an actor that we need to spawn. So let's spawn an actor, spawn actor from class. This class, and spawn transform. Spawn transform is going to be the same as an instance transform. So what we're gonna do, we have a component and we have an index of a we have a hism component and we have an index of an instance. So let's get component. No, let's get component as a local variable here, and let's get an index also as a local variable here. And let's get instance transform at this index also in the world space. And we will receive a transform world transform of this instance that we have overlapped and connect it into spawn transform. Now we will spawn an actor at the same location as our static mesh that we have overlapped. Next thing that we need to do, we need to remove an instance. So let's copy component in the index, paste it here, and call remove instance. And we should provide an index, of course. Now, that's it. What we need to do, we need to call this function, replace instance with actor, and we should do it on box did overlap. So let's call this function connected. We have to provide a component. It's going to be an hierarchical instance static mesh and an index, other body index. Other body index is an index of an instance in this case. So let's add this component to a character. Forest optimizator. Save, compile, and let's test it out. Now I think that our branch should be replaced. Also, let's run it in a viewport. And I have few branches already. I don't know what are these branches. Branch. Let me delete them. I don't want an actors to appear here. And I just type here a branch in my outliner, so I will see if some of the actors will spawn. Now let's move into the forest. And here it is. Here you see a branch, and as you can see in outliner, an actor has spawned because I have overlapped an instance, and we don't have an instance here, so why we can pick up a branch and nothing is here. One more branch appeared. Also, here is far, we have one more branch. If I will move here, an actor has appeared, and you didn't even mention some changes because it spawned with the same transform at the same location. Great. So, but it works only for branches now. If you want to add it, for example, for a bush, you're gonna just open this. You're gonna just where I'm spawning the bushes. Here I'm spawning the bushes. You're going to static mesh spawner, selecting one of static mesh, copying its name like previously, creating a new row, pasting it here, and selecting an actor with which it wanna be replaced. Yet it is a routine work to put every actor here, every static mesh that should be replaced, but it will save you a lot of time in future. Next, what we want to do is we want to replace an actor back to an instance if we are far. So let's change a function replace actor with instance. I don't know why I've called it replicate. Replace actor with instance. Well, what should it have? It should have an actor to replace. Actor of type actor. Oops, actor. Like this. And let's call this function here also. On box detent overlap, we are not ending overlap with hism. We're ending overlap with an actor. So just plugging it here, and other actor goes here. Well, now we should check whether this data table has any row with this actor. So let's open our first optimizer, and again we're gonna get data table row names. It is gonna be our forest instance replacers, and for each of these rows, let's add for each loop, we're gonna read a row. So get row data table row. Get data table row here. Data table is gonna be the same, forest instance replacers, and the row name is gonna be array element. We're breaking out our row, and we're gonna check if this actor class is the same as an actor that we have ended overlap now. So let's get actor. It's our local variable, and get class of this actor and check if they are equal. Well, that's fine. And if we have found one, then we should end this loop. By the way, so we don't need for each loop, we need for each loop with break. Maybe I can convert it to break like this. Unfortunately, I think that I can't, so I'm gonna just delete it and make for each loop with break. Or no, we don't need for each loop with break, we'll just continue here, and after returning from this function, for each will stop working. Now we have found that, for example, yes, we have such an actor to be replaced with an instance, but we don't know what a hism to use, so we have to have a variable here. And let's make it hisms. And let's make it actor hisms. And it's gonna be a map. So let's select an actor object reference, even actor class reference, and it is gonna be a map. So for every actor class, we will have some hierarchical instance static mesh, like this. Well, we should get this actor hisms and find. We're gonna find a value well, with this map, we don't even need to check a data table, so we can just remove it. We will need only this one. So we're checking if this map contains a hism. And if it is so, then we're getting this hism and adding an instance. If true, we're adding an instance. And we have to select that an instance will be added in the world space. And an instance transform is going to be an actor transform. Get actor transform returns us a transform in the world space. Well, after that, we're gonna destroy this actor. So we are getting actor. Where is it? And call destroy actor. Like this. Okay. one more thing that we have to do here. When our actor will be destroyed, it may generate some end overlap event. So at first, actor cannot be destroyed momentarily. So we have to check whether we should replace this actor once more. We should add a branch, and we should replace it only if actor is valid. As you can see, is valid returns true if it's not null and not pending kill. If it is pending kill already, we are not destroying it. Compile, save. Now we have to fill this map somehow. Let's go to replace instance with actor. And here we're gonna get actor hisms and add hism is our component, and a class is a class of the spawned actor. So it's this class. Like this. And that's it. But we need to be sure that our actor is generating an overlap event, so that our box that we have added is overlapping with our actor. So how we gonna do this? Let's open my BP branch. Let's select my, for example, branch, and it has a capsule. I don't know why do I have this capsule here. I'm gonna delete this. Let's select my static mesh and check its collision. Its collision preset is set to block all dynamic, and its object type is world dynamic. That's enough. So it should not overlap with forest vegetation replacer. It just should be a world dynamic or world static. Or if it is, for example, not a world dynamic but physics body, you are going into forest optimizer, setup function, and here we're setting our box to overlap only with world static and world dynamic. You're just duplicating it and making it also overlap with physics body. But I don't need this. I will leave it world dynamic. And that's it. Also, you have to ensure that a static mesh for your branch, for example, no, branch in my case, for your static mesh has some collision. So let me find my branch. I will go here, copy it here. Here is my static mesh, and I'm gonna show simple collision. So here is my simple collision for a branch. Well, it's not that simple, by the way, but no problem. So I have it. If you don't have it, you select in collision and add box collision, for example. And that's all you need. So now let's test it out again. It should work. I'm not sure, but it should. So on the right side, we don't have any branches spawned. Let's move a little bit closer, and a branch is spawned. Now let's move far from it. And end overlap didn't called, by the way. Or it is called, but nothing happens. Let's open here, and let's print what we're ending overlap with. Save, compile. Okay, we have a branch. Okay, it doesn't overlap, so let's select our branch. And it should generate an end overlap event, by the way. First optimizable. Stop. World static and world dynamic. It overlaps with them. And my branch has its own collision. It is also collision enabled, should be at least query only. So not with no collision it will not work, and it seems like forest vegetation replacer should be set to overlap. So be sure that it is set to overlap. And let's test it again. Okay, I saw a branch and I moved away from a branch. Right, I'm sorry. So as you can see, a branch is spawned. I'm turning back and now it's not an instance. Okay, and now it's not an actor. Actor is removed and replaced with an instance. You cannot see any actors there. So if I will pick it up, it generates. Okay, it looks like. Does it destroy my actor? Or. Okay, replace actor with an instance. Is it replaceable with an instance? Let me check this out. If it is a problem with an instance. Yes, it is a problem with this function. So I think that is valid is not a best check. So what should we do? We should be able to check if our object should be replaced. So let's create a new interface here. It's gonna be a blueprint interface and call it BPI forest instanceable. Let's open it up and let's add a function called should be replaced with instance, and it's gonna return us a boolean value of, for example, let's name it yes. Compile, save, and our branch or any other thing that you're gonna replace or parent class should implement this interface. Maybe I'm gonna change it in my parent class and I'm gonna call it BPI forest instanceable. Whoa. Why do I have two interfaces? I need only forest instanceable. Okay, I think that it's gonna be a second one. Forest instanceable. Compile and save. Now let's open an interfaces and we have to define a function should be replaced with instance. Well, by default, let's plug it yes. And what we're gonna check? First, we're gonna check if it is valid. If it is valid, no, yes. If it is valid, and we're gonna check if self is valid. That's gonna be a first. And for example, for my BP resource, I have for my BP resource, it will be the only check. But for example, for my branch, if I have already started to pick it up, then it's not gonna work. So I'm gonna define this function also in my BP branch, should be replaced with an instance. I'm gonna add call to parent function. So it will call my BP resource. And if a parent says that it can be replaced and my branch is not collected, so where is my and also what I'm gonna add on this I'm not gonna add anything here else, but you may want. Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm gonna also check if is actor being destroyed. And it should be false. So not boolean and connect it like this. And that's a condition. oops, like this. So now back to forest optimizer, and here on replace actor with an instance, we should not check it like this. We should get an actor, and we should call this function of this interface should be replaced with instance. And check if yes, then we're changing it. Compile, save. And let's play. Now I've moved to a branch and it wasn't replaced. It wasn't replaced back to an instance. By the way, now what happens? Should be replaced with instance. Yes. Let me open BP resource. Is not being destroyed and is valid. Then it should be replaced with instance. How? BP branch. Maybe. Oh, I have such function here in BP branch. I'm gonna delete this. Start it and let's test it again. Now it is replaced with instance, actor, instance, actor, instance. And if I am picking it up, it's marked as it's being destroyed and then it's not replaced with an instance. So that's it for this video. We've made it with a branch, but you can simply change it by just populating your data table. So the only thing you need to do is to populate one data table and check collisions on your static meshes. And it is much simpler than the previous system and hope it will help you. Thanks for watching.